basic idea of the sound design technique is to just get a lot of random sounds, put them on different audio tracks, layer them randomly on top of each other, and then process them together. Already just randomly dragged a lot of recordings of mine on different audio tracks and put them inside a group. And as you can see, a lot of these are kind of shorter impact sounds, but it really makes sense to choose a few longer, more textural sounds, just to have a greater variety of sounds in there and to always just have some noise going on. And I also made sure to make this quite a few bars long because we're going to do random modulations on these, and we just want to have enough space to get a lot of variations here. So without any processing, it sounds like this. You don't have to use just recordings, you could also just use synthesized sounds and, mix everything together. Just get a greater variety of sounds than I have here, but this will do just fine as well. So now I'm going to start processing this. At first I just want to compress everything, so I'm just going to use OTT on here and also put a glue compressor in there to compress it a bit more and also boost it into the clipper a bit. And one of the main things I like to do with this is to modulate the pitch. I'm just going to grab a shifter here and randomly draw in some automations with the pitch here. And of course you could also just use an LFO for this. Alright, so now it sounds like this. It doesn't really matter what kind of effects you're using. You can just throw anything at this and see what happens. Just try the spectral time here. And something that usually also works quite well is phaser and laner maybe. So let's just actually copy this and automate the dry wet of both of these. Doing the same for the flanger here. So now it sounds like this. And after this, we could just go also with a bit of reverb. It really helps to glue things together even more. And after this, maybe just another compressor. And I also kind of want more pitch modulation. I'm just gonna put something else to modulate the pitch in front of the shifter here. I'm just gonna use Ableton's grain delay. And I'm just gonna use an LFO for this and put it on the pitch here. Doesn't need to be at 100%, we just want to add some more movement. So now that we have all this random stuff going on, we can just bounce this. And I'm just resampling this to audio. And now the next step is to just put this into a sampler. So I'm just going to grab the Ableton stock sampler, put the sample in there and increase the volume a bit. And now we can play through the sample. So then what I really like to do for this kind of stuff is to use a pitch envelope. You can use this either to create a more punchy start of this, so if you're going more for an impact sound, but it also helps to give it a nice texture and nice movement if you choose a longer decay time like this. And with this pitch bend, you easily can get these more sci-fi transformer type sounds as well. But let's also do some more processing on this thing as well. So again, I'm going to start with compression. I'm just going to put an OTT here. And then maybe another phaser or flanger. If you have a disperser, you can use this. If you're using Ableton, you could also just stack a bunch of EQ frees on top of each other to get a similar effect. And maybe also use some saturation here, enable the soft clip. Use some more distortion or saturation. Let's try this bass fattener preset. And at the end of this, let's just use some more reverb again try one of these textures here. Doesn't really matter much, we just want this at a really low mix. And at the end of this you can just use a compressor or a limiter. So now it's interesting to just browse through the sample essentially and choose different starting points and see what kind of stuff you get. Also play it at a bunch of different pitches. And of course play around with the decay time of this. Also you can change the amount here. We can also inverse this. And what typically also works well with this kind of stuff is to use some sort of tremolo effect. We can just use auto pen here in Ableton. And so if you wanted to fine-tune this a bit, then you could also just start drawing in MIDI notes. And then draw in automations for the rate here, for example. And you could also, as an addition to this pitch envelope, or instead of it, draw in pitch bends in here. Let's actually increase the range here. Again, you could just randomize this or draw in random automations for this. One tip, if you're using the Ableton stock sampler, you can just go to the MIDI section here and go to velocity and map this to the sample offset and set this to 100%. And now you can control the sample starting point with the velocity here. What I like to do is to just draw in a bunch of different MIDI notes, and then you can just play around with the velocities here. Then each of these notes will start at a different point in the sample here, depending on the velocity setting. So this makes it really easy to get a bunch of different variations. I hope this gives you maybe some interesting ideas to play around with this. I think it's a really nice technique to create these highly stylized and processed sounds. And it's especially fun, I think, if you're just using really raw organic recordings and then you can change them into something that sounds completely different.